Why Generation Z feels everything so deeply. They are the first generation who never knew a world without the internet. Not dial-up. Not landlines. Just constant, instant connection from the very beginning. Think about what that actually means. Every emotion they've ever felt has had an audience. A first heartbreak wasn't just private pain. It could become a caption. A joke that flopped wasn't just forgotten. It could live online forever. Imagine growing up where every mistake has the potential to be permanent. That changes something deep in how a person processes emotion. Generation Z didn't just experience childhood. They experienced childhood under observation. And that shaped a nervous system tuned to notice reactions instantly. A like. A comment. A silence that feels louder than words. Psychologists have started calling this heightened social sensitivity. Not fragility. Sensitivity. Their brains adapted to read emotional signals faster than any generation before them. Have you ever met someone who can sense tension in a room within seconds? That's not a coincidence. That's a skill built from years of scanning digital spaces for subtle shifts in tone. But here's the trade-off nobody talks about enough. When you're that attuned to everything, you also absorb everything. Other people's stress. Other people's opinions. An endless stream of global events, delivered directly to a device in your pocket. No generation before them carried this much information, this constantly, this young. Think about that weight for a moment. By the time many of them were teenagers, they'd already witnessed more global crises in real time than most adults process in a lifetime. Climate anxiety. Economic uncertainty. Political division, playing out in their comment sections daily. It's no wonder many of them grew up fluent in the language of mental health. Not because they're overly dramatic. Because they needed the vocabulary early, just to describe what they were already feeling. Here's something remarkable about that. Generation Z didn't inherit therapy speak from nowhere. They built an entire culture around naming emotional experiences that older generations were simply taught to ignore. Anxiety. Burnout. Boundaries. Words that used to be clinical are now part of everyday conversation, because Gen Z insisted they mattered. Of course. This constant awareness comes with real challenges. Comparison happens faster than ever. Rest can feel impossible when everyone else appears to be thriving online. And sometimes, feeling everything this intensely is genuinely exhausting. But there's another side to this story. Because Generation Z also grew up believing something previous generations rarely said out loud. That mental health is not weakness. That asking for help is not failure. That a boundary is not selfish. Think about how different that is. Generation X learned to carry everything silently. Millennials learned to seek validation quietly. Generation Z decided to talk about it, loudly, publicly, without apology. Have you noticed how openly younger people now discuss therapy, burnout, or anxiety? That openness isn't oversharing. It's a direct response to growing up overstimulated and undersupported. They're trying to build the emotional vocabulary nobody gave them. There's also something powerful hiding inside all that sensitivity. Empathy, at a scale rarely seen before. Because when you feel everything this intensely yourself, you often recognize it instantly in someone else. That's why so many of them gravitate toward causes, communities, and connection. Not because it's trendy. Because isolation, to them, feels unbearable after growing up so digitally connected. Maybe that's the real story here. Generation Z isn't overly sensitive. They're highly attuned, in a world that gave them more input than any generation in history. And instead of shutting that down, they're learning to work with it. Naming it. Setting boundaries around it. building an emotional language the rest of the world is only just beginning to catch up to. Think about what that could mean going forward. A generation raised on constant information, learning, in real time, how to protect their own peace. And maybe, after all of this, feeling deeply was never their weakness at all.